Welcome to the Daily Beast podcast. I'm Joanna Coles, Chief Content Officer of the Daily Beast.
And I am Samantha Bee, Chief Content Officer and Professional Casting Agent for a whole squad of gorgeous fake Melanias.
It's Friday, 3 days after the most extraordinary election of our lifetime. So we've got an all-politics episode for you. And on today's show, we are joined by Beast contributor and co-writer of Lean In, the best-selling book about female leadership, Nell Scovell. As Beast of the Week, we're talking to journalist and Democratic politician John Avlon about his closely watched congressional race and its parallels to the Trump campaign. And we've got comedian and host of CNN's new very fun game show, Have I Got News for You? And Beast columnist Michael Ian Black. But more importantly, Sam, how did you spend election night?
Well, I feel
like it was a bad night in your household.
It was actually it was not an average night in my household, certainly, but I started watching all the coverage. I started watching the results come in. I immediately felt those 2016 vibes, and I actually walked away from the television, and instead I watched the Martha Stewart doc, which is excellent.
It's so good.
And we can talk about it at a later date. And we're not going to talk about it today because I have a lot of thoughts.
Well, I hope that we can get Martha on to talk about it. I interviewed Martha about a month ago. And she just said she didn't like it. And since then, she's been more vocal about not liking it. She felt it made her look sad. And she's definitely not sad.
Oh, well.
But I hope we can get her on to talk about it.
It was a great alt to watching talking heads go through election results, which is never fun for me. And I actually never like watching it. And then after the results came in, I simply could not summon tears. Joanna, I beg you to tell me, what was it like in the Daily Beast newsroom? Because I bet you had those TVs blaring, all those talking heads talking about crap.
We did. Well, you can't have them blaring because then it would be too difficult for everybody to work. But we have 4 big TV screens on. The entire of the staff was basically there. People came in from everywhere to do it.
Yep.
We also had a big crew on in London. And, you know, this is what we live for. For us, it's very exciting. This is our Super Bowl. We had a very rousing start to the evening from Ben Sherwood, who you know, and who is the CEO of the Daily Beast, and my partner in crime, I like to say. And he had run very successfully ABC News.
Yeah.
So he is very familiar with this territory, and everybody was just thrilled to be there. We had an enormous array of completely oddly juxtaposed foods. So we had, I think every nation's food was represented, apart from maybe Afghanistan.
Tell me, describe, what did you eat? What did you drink? Where did you sleep? Do you have a cot?
We didn't need a cot because it was very clear very early on what was going to happen. And everybody was pacing, thinking, have we prepared, right? Do we have enough pre-writes for this?
Describe your spread.
We had fish and chips to represent the British people in the office.
Wow.
We had sushi, we had salads, we had pizza. I was anxious that people were going to eat carbs and it was going to slow them down.
Sure.
But I would like to say I didn't smoke, but I wanted to. I didn't drink vodka, but I wanted to. It's a bit like the non-Bridget Jones's Diary here.
Sure.
It was an abstemious night from that point of view. I mainlined protein for energy and lots of water.
Well, you know what? Distress burns carbs like
Does it? I
nobody's
hope so.
business.
Well,
and
that's good for the next 4 years.
I'm actually just so tickled imagining what your workplace smells like even a few days later, because I know that you don't have a single window in that building that you can pop open.
There were a lot of people who'd come in with their wash bags. So there was a lot of teeth brushing going on. Hugh Doherty, our executive editor, led the troops in the charge. It was very exciting.
That is
very exciting.
Delightful. Okay, I want to say, before we move on, I want to say congratulations on that big full spread in the New York Times.
Thank you.
The other day. Very good.
That was a fun piece for us.
And I do want to say congrats on a great photo following the New York Magazine photo fiasco. And as I texted you, the article refers to you as a glamorous Briton. And that's all that I needed to read. And
I'm happy to take it. Thank you. What I am told, or I'm reliably informed that there is apparently a podcast out there that talks about the New York media. And my photo in New York Magazine was ranked number one worst. Number one worst in the top 10.
You redeemed yourself. And I guess I just have I just have a question for you because, in light of the decision that America has delivered onto us, what is it like post-decision? Do you have an all hands come to Jesus the next day and you think, okay, well, this is what the next 4 years is going to look like?
For us, it's business as usual, right? Except we're going to have a new administration to cover. It's going to be an exciting administration to cover because they're not predictable. Donald Trump is not a predictable leader. He loves being covered by the press. We know that basically his job as president is to sit and watch television all day. And we are all now, I feel like, bit parts or extras in his reality show. America has been turned into the Donald Trump reality show.
I don't want to say that his job is to sit and watch TV all day. I think he has a different job. I don't think he's supposed to watch the Golf Channel all day.
But I think what he's doing is watching himself all day and watching what works and what doesn't work, right? He's very cognizant of the ratings. He's a performer. He's an entertainer. He has fans. That's how he thinks of himself.
Oh, boy.
And that's very interesting for journalists to cover.
Is everybody up for this? Is anyone up for this? Because by the time the next 4 years is over, we will have had 12 years of wall-to-wall Trump in our eyeballs. Is anyone up for this?
Well, I think if they're not up for it, they need to leave now. This is going to be an incredibly interesting time in American history. I mean, he's got all three parts of the government. It's astonishing what the Republicans have pulled off. And we are going to have a front row seat to history.
Oh, well, we will be talking about that today. And I do want to make note of one exciting thing, which is that we are together being interviewed on the podcast Pivot next week.
We are.
So we need to be ready for that.
We are. We need to do lots of prep. I'm going to start running around the block.
Yeah, we're not allowed to be vague about this podcast.
Is that what they said?
On Pivot. I just think we just need to have a mission statement. We need our own constitution.
We do. All right, you could write that.
Oh.
You write it and I'll edit.
I thought you were going to write it. Okay.
We're joined now by comedian and Beast contributor Michael Ian Black, who nobly dropped out of NYU to promote the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles on stage reenactment. Well, someone had to do it. Thankfully, things got better from there, and Michael is now a beast of an actor. He's a comedian, a writer. He's a regular contributor to the Daily Beast, and beyond his work on shows like Wet Hot, American Summer, The State, and Have I Got News for You, he recently penned a very popular column on the Daily Beast called Here's What I Learned from Trump's Victory. I'm the problem. It's me. Michael, thanks for coming in.
Can I ask how you know each other? Because you've known each other for a long time, yeah?
No, we met at the Daily Beast, actually, because Michael has been writing a column that appears on Wednesdays.
I know, I read it.
We're work colleagues.
We're colleagues, yeah, we're work colleagues. And then I did the thing that you're going to do, which is I got shot out of a cannon on Have I Got News for You. But it felt fine because Michael Ian Black was our team captain.
That is fantastic. I thought you knew each other for 39 years.
Okay. Neither of us are 39 years old.
I know.
Yeah, how could that be?
Seems impossible.
How could that be? So Michael, thank you for joining us this morning. Your column, What I Learned from Donald Trump's Victory, I'm the Problem, It's Me, was our most read piece. I think maybe this week. It clearly hit a nerve with everybody.
Do I get a bonus when that happens?
No. In fact, you get less money for that.
You get to be on the podcast. Isn't that prize enough?
It's prize enough, thank you. So talk us through this piece.
Well, I mean, obviously, I was with you, but it's like we fight, meaning people like me, for the qualities and attitudes and attributes and principles that we believe in, and then to be repudiated so soundly for those very same attributes, traits, qualities, and principles makes me feel like, you know what? For the entire Trump era, people in my Twitter feed have been telling me that I'm the problem and people like me are the problem. And I think maybe they're right. Maybe I am the problem. Maybe these things aren't what I should be fighting for, or at least putting my attention to. If we take the Trump voter at their word, they're dispossessed and economically insecure, and I have no reason not to take them at their word. It's just that when they decide to accommodate blatant racism, misogyny, anti-democratic attitudes, and let's say lowercase f fascism along with it, it's like I don't know what to do. And so for me, I just feel like, okay, I'm the problem. I'm just going to step back.
And you're not even an urban elite either. I mean, you're living in Savannah, Georgia.
What is the temperature in Savannah? Do you feel aligned with the community of people around you?
Well, Savannah's a very liberal town. I mean, there's a big art school here. It's a very kind of creative, offbeat community. It has its old Southern money too, and so there definitely is like a Trump presence. But it's a majority Black city. It's very diverse, and it makes me, I do feel more aligned here in a certain way that I did when I was living in Connecticut for the last 20 years, which was very Connecticutian, as you can imagine.
I've always thought it was the least sexy state in the nation, Connecticut.
Connecticut? It is. Sex is forbidden in Connecticut.
How dare you? There's all the key parties, all the best key parties take place in Connecticut.
To my point, the least sexy place in the nation.
Have you not been to Arkansas, Joanna?
But at least Arkansas, you've got that kind of southern, you've got trees dripping with Spanish moss, haven't you?
Is there anybody running a ghost tour down there who needs a new host? Because I'm without a hosting job, and I think I could really kill it.
Oh, I think you'd do great. Savannah is known as the most haunted city in America.
I know.
Every night when you walk around, there's dozens of ghost tours. And so there's like converted hearses that people make where they chop off the roof and people sit in the back of the hearse looking around. Sam, I think you'd be great.
Thank you so much. Do you feel like there's any value in the finger pointing? Is there a value to be had in assigning blame? Do you foresee us on a path of kind of weeding out toxins, as it were?
No.
Okay.
Not. Toxins will remain. In fact, they will dominate. At the moment, no, I don't see any need for finger pointing. I think there's a way to look at data and analytics, let's say in 3 or 4 or 6 months, and do a more sober assessment of what happened. But this idea that X is to blame or Y is to blame, no, America is to blame. The people who looked at Donald Trump and thought that they wanted a reprise of the 4 years that he was president, they are to blame. The one thing I don't want to do is blame the Kamala campaign. I thought she ran just a great, inspiring, and yes, I will say the damn word, joyful campaign. It rescued what was a moribund presidential season and turned it into a cause for hope and optimism, and I'm very grateful for that. I thought Tim Walz was a fantastic vice presidential candidate. I thought she worked her ass off. I don't know that we could have expected anything more or a better candidate, but she had some structural problems. 1, a vagina, and 2 is the wrong amount of melanin content in her skin. And I'm sorry, I just believe that. Somebody tweeted last night, if she had run the same exact campaign, but she was a white dude, she would have won walking away. And it's hard for me to argue that. I feel like that's probably right.
Yeah, I could not take issue with that either. I totally agree with you. And I do think that there is a really critical misunderstanding, or just everybody underestimated the power of people's desire for change of any kind.
Well, I think they think this is change, don't they? Isn't the point of Donald Trump that he is a change
No, that's
candidate?
what I'm saying. They underestimated.
Oh, I thought you meant they wanted change with her.
No. I think everybody underestimated how much people were willing to throw the deck of cards up in the air to achieve change.
But I mean, we did it. We did it once before, and we've all memory hold chaos and banality and incompetence and grifting. And somehow he was able to project this narrative that it was a time of peace and prosperity, as opposed to incompetence and chaos, which is what it was.
When the results were rolling in and you could kind of see the way things were going, how did it sit in your body? I'm so curious, because I had a lot of people come up to me the day after and like touch their hearts and look at me mournfully. And I was like, you know what? There's no tears. This is the choice. I don't feel good about it. This is not what I wanted, but I can't. I'm not going to like tear my heart out of my chest on the street. I mean, this is the choice people made. It's the overwhelming choice. It's a full mandate.
I'm like you. My son, who's 23, was kind of spiraling. And I said to him, which is true, in 2016, I was exactly where you are. I was like devastated. I was freaked out. I was scared. And as difficult as those 4 years were, and as sort of tenuous as they felt, we got through it. I don't have the same level of confidence that we're going to get through it now than I did then, for all the reasons that have been talked about ad nauseum. But what am I going to do? I mean, you still have to get up every day. I still have podcast obligations.
I mean, my God.
You do have podcast obligations.
And I sort of feel like, you know what? I'm willing to check out now. Because like I said, if I'm the problem, okay, so let me just hang back and you've got everything that you wanted. You've got a compliant Senate, you've got a compliant House, you've got a Supreme Court, you've got immunity. Have at it, dude. Maybe you'll make everything so much better. I don't think so, but I'm wrong about everything else. Maybe I'm wrong about this.
Are you going to stay on Twitter for the next 4 years? Or 4 days, 2 minutes? I'm out.
Every day is a fight to stay on or go off. But I've got the benefit of addiction.
Right.
So, talking of X or Twitter.
Oh, yeah, right.
Elon Musk appears to be a player in all this.
For now.
Do you think last week we had on the show Michael Wolff, who predicted that it would end in tears, Elon and Donald Trump, and probably Donald Trump's tears.
I think it will end in tears because you can't have two people who want to be king. You can't have two people who want to be boss.
King of the world.
King of the world, king of the universe, king of the galaxy. You cannot have that. That does not work. That ends in bitterness. But again, what do I know? Maybe it'll be great.
But every person he brings in, it ends with tears. I mean, it always ends with tears, except for Ben Carson, who was asleep for 4 years.
Right.
Well, tears or jail.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe tears in jail, tears and jail.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can take jail off the table for anybody with an R next to their name.
And of course, you and Donald Trump have something in common because his younger son goes to your alma mater, NYU, which you dropped out of to promote the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
That's right, Joanna.
The stage show.
I love it when people bring up the stage shows that I participated in. Because I was in the live stage production of Sailor Moon. So you and I have quite a bit in common, sir.
What's Silver Moon? What is that?
Sailor Moon? The anime classic?
I've never
heard
of it. I've never
Sailor
heard
Scout.
of it.
I danced and sang on a stage for just thousands of extremely bored children.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'd love to hear one of your numbers.
Well, when I'm down in Savannah, it'll be part of my, it'll be the end. It'll be the big finale to my ghost tour, the ghosts of my former jobs. Kate, I want to ask you about Have I Got News For You, because I think it's a great show. I love it. I think Roy's a great host. You're a great team captain. I love Amber Ruffin. It's really fun to watch. Like, is everybody sitting down? I guess you're off. I guess you're dark this week. That was a wise choice.
That was smart, yeah. I think everybody thought it was going to be election chaos as opposed to election utter depression and devastation.
Yeah. I guess how do you reassess? I guess the show doesn't need a reassessment, or will you all sit together and have a kind of an all hands and go, oh, okay, now we carry on. Just do things the way they were. What's the tone? Is there anything that will change in the show?
We're going to go pro MAGA. I mean, yes.
Oh, okay, great.
We're fully pro MAGA starting next week.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful.
I guess that's probably the biggest change.
Yeah, it's a subtle change, but important.
The purpose of the show, and I think any comedy, is to make fun of people and make fun of people in power, and we'll certainly have our hands for the next, hopefully, 4 years. In 4 years.
Well, I would appreciate if you give me all the answers to the questions in advance.
Well, that's the beautiful thing is we don't prepare. You're gonna show up there at 5 o'clock. You're gonna get a talking to from the producers, and then we're gonna send you out there into the lion's den. And because you're such a smart, cogent, articulate young woman, you'll have no problem.
I had missed everything in that sentence except when you said that I was a young woman.
Yeah.
And that was nice. That felt good.
Yeah, Michael, keep writing. Your columns are very good. And when you say that you really don't understand it at all, how do you stay engaged with it?
Oh, I think I've decided to disengage from it because I don't understand it at all. I mean, that's maybe more cynical than I intend, but there definitely is a feeling like I'm just wrong. They clearly don't reflect that of my countrymen, at least not enough of them to elect somebody highly qualified, competent, as opposed to somebody who's just going to tear through the country like a bull in a china shop. So I'm wrong, and I need to understand better why I'm wrong.
Well, I'm still impressed that you've got a son who's 23 because you don't look old enough.
You're a delight.
Yeah, Michael, thank you. And we want to invite you to be a more frequent contributor to the podcast. We need our Southern correspondent. You're our Georgia correspondent.
Can you bring me a pint of ice cream next time?
I can. I will.
Thank
I'll bring you peach cobbler.
Thank you.
Peach cobbler. Delicious.
Green beans, which are delicious.
Fantastic.
Okay, Michael, you are released. Thank you very much. We're joined now by our Beast of the Week, John Avlon. He's the former editor-in-chief of The Daily Beast and former senior political analyst and anchor for CNN. He started as Rudy Giuliani's speechwriter, and John's career has been dripping with success, I guess, up until now. For this election, he ran for Congress on Long Island in New York's District 1 in Suffolk County, but he lost to Nicholas LaLota, a Republican incumbent who won 55% of the vote to John's 44%.
Thank you so much. It's so delightful to be talking to you. Thanks for saying yes to us.
Of course. To the beast, always. Once a beast, always a beast.
Tell us about the campaign. First of all, why did you run?
Well, I ran because I felt like talking about this election on TV was civically lazy, frankly, given the stakes of the race. I believed that our American democracy was in danger, and that Margaret and I ultimately decided, my wife, Margaret Hoover, that we didn't want to look at our kids and tell them when we could have done more when it mattered most. And so I'm glad I got in the arena. We fought the good fight. Our polls showed us that we were surging and in a position to win, and then the red wave that affected so many swing districts hit us. But Democrats do need to, I think, get not uselessly introspective, but honestly introspective. And I'm always a country over party guy, a principle over party guy. I was an independent for 20 years as a journalist, and I meant it, right? I just felt there was one party that actually believed in bipartisanship that was and building a big tent right now. So I do think the Democrats got to, as I've said, stand up to the far left as well as the far right.
How do you do that? What's the mechanism for the Democrats rethinking, or for the Democrats analyzing what went wrong?
Well, look, there will be 1,001 forensics, but I do think it requires dealing with, in polls consistently, people perceive the Democratic Party as equally extreme as the Republican Party. Now, it's not. I can push back on that in a million different ways, and did so during the campaign with some data crimes. There were 7 members of the House who supported the policy known as defund the police, which I think is the most self-defeating slogan in recent political memory. This goes back to the last cycle.
Probably the worst 3 words uttered in modern politics.
Yeah. But 139 House Republicans voted to overturn the election after the attack on the Capitol. That's a qualitative, fundamental difference. But I do think, in states like New York, taxes are too high. The core of my campaign was the slogan, rebuild the middle. We got to rebuild the middle of our politics and rebuild the middle of our economy, and those two things are connected. And I think it also means speaking out with moral clarity when there's illiberalism on the far left. I think that's really important.
How do we even begin, really? How do we begin to have civil, substantive conversations in the wake of everything that has just passed? I am literally asking you how we do that, because I don't know.
My favorite, sadly apocryphal Abraham Lincoln quote is, "I'm an optimist because I don't see the point in being anything else." But I'm not trying to sugarcoat the dangers of this American moment. The idea that Trump could get more votes after trying to overturn our democracy on the back of a lie is something that is a challenge to all my notions of ethics and honor and decency.
Can I push back on one thing? I think a lot of people feel that January the 6th was a bunch of strange losers who turned up at the Capitol. But the fact that they were all filming themselves and putting it on Facebook of all social media platforms, doesn't suggest that it was actually an organised effort to take over our democracy. I'm not saying it was a great moment in American life, but I'm not sure that people bought that it was actually a systematic takeover of the American democratic system.
What it was clearly was a semi-coordinated effort to stop the certification by deadlines, to try to create a constitutional crisis, to say that they didn't lose an election, that they did, and then to try to seize power if they could. I'm not saying there's any easy answers here. There's not. And this is going to be the thing I'm most concerned about is that the alliance of autocracies are going to be emboldened at this moment. And frankly, also, American journalism seems to be on the back foot. And I think it's vitally important that journalists are up to the challenge of covering this administration fairly, accurately, honestly, and aggressively.
Yeah, and I guess I do worry about that vengeance and retribution. I think it's going to be such a murky phase of life for journalists coming into the next 4 years. What is your take on that? I'm very worried for the state of journalism and broadcast television.
Well, I was going to ask you, John, what did you think of Jeff Bezos' decision, which we discussed on last week's pod, to not endorse Kamala Harris after the endorsement had been written? And then, of course, he was very quick onto X to congratulate President Trump on his victory.
I thought that was ill-timed and did not reflect the courage that Marty Baron had brought to the paper and the kind of self-evident moral clarity. Now, I do think that journalism needs to take very seriously the need to regain trust, and I think there are interesting ideas on how to do that. But the anticipatory obedience that Timothy Snyder talks about, I think you could see in the decision of the LA Times, the Washington Post, and the USA Today. USA Today, perhaps most forgivably given their status, but not the Washington Post given their pedigree. And I think that's one of the dangers. I mean, we do need to be very clear-eyed about, I'm a historian on the side, and the historical patterns and forces we're dealing with. And the idea that big businessmen and very wealthy people can channel someone with autocratic tendencies in a constructive direction that benefits them is one that history suggests is a fool's errand.
I love the way you say you're a historian on the side, by the way. What are you on the side, Sam?
On the side? A cowardly baker. No, I don't know. I don't know what I am on the side.
It's the sort of thing that, I'm a stripper on the side. I'm sort of...
It feels like America has become desensitized to the type of behavior that would have just been unthinkable in a leader just 20 years ago. I mean, I was there for the Dean scream. That was disqualifying, and it was so lighthearted. I mean, it was just not even... It's so irrelevant in today's world. It's pastoral.
Pastoral. Look, I do think that's one of the dangers. And the things that trouble me the most are there's certain principles that I take as moral bedrock, right? Character is destiny. Decency matters. But we also need to look at the fact that, Latino men seem to have voted for Donald Trump, that white women voted against the Democratic nominee again.
Can I ask you something? Why is it so surprising that Latino men would vote for Donald Trump? Why is there an assumption that because you are a Latino and you probably got here legally, you would support the idea of people coming in illegally? That feels to me like one of the big mistakes that Democrats made.
I agree. And that's one of the reasons I go back to, I think, the limitations in people's pushback against identity politics. It's ultimately demeaning, right? I mean, first of all, as has often been said, the Hispanic community is incredibly diverse. Democrats in the last cycle had a hard time, for example, being tough on Castro. Go pull my obit, quote unquote, for Fidel Castro from the Daily Beast, and you'll see I shed no tears for that cat. Or Ortega or Maduro. And folks who get here legally, it's more the dysfunction, right? I mean, and the fact that, when people commute from Long Island or Westchester and if they get out at Grand Central Station and they see the Roosevelt Hotel, they get a sense of exaggerated civic disorder. And I do think this is where it's really important that Democrats have to be tough on crime and have to be tough on the causes of crime. They need to be. I campaigned very strongly. I would have voted for that bipartisan border security bill on day one that Donald Trump and my opponent helped kill.
I think there's no group of voters that is monolithic. And that includes women.
I think there might be a group of voters that I call the CVS voters who want to go into their local CVS, buy things that aren't locked behind glass cupboards, that where you have to press the bell and get someone to come over to get you a tube of toothpaste. I think it's those frustrations which indicate to people that culture's not working for them. And Democrats completely fail to solve it. The idea that you can, steal up to $900 worth of stuff in San Francisco and nobody's going to come after you. That's what impacts people's regular daily lives.
I also think that we cannot discount the fact that many voters look at Trump and see his life as aspirational. Mm-hmm. There is something aspirational about just being rich.
I'm not going to feed into that, but I think I agree with Joanna on the first point. Look, the quote that keeps me up at night and has in politics for a long time is from Bill Clinton, where he said, people will vote for strong and wrong every time. And that's where I think Democrats need to be stronger. We need to be tougher on crime. When there's civic disorder, it needs to be addressed. I mean, this is where it goes back to my background working for Rudy Giuliani when he was saying, as mayor of New York, quality of life policing works. Mm-hmm. It's important that people don't have a sense of civic chaos and civic disorder. And if you effectively decriminalize, shoplifting, that's going to make that does not resonate as common sense. If people feel that they're going to get civic chaos and high crime, they'll vote for the other guy, no matter how bad that is.
John, also talk about the evolution of the podcast election, and you talk about
the evolution
media.
Of this podcast.
But you talk about the right-wing media, and obviously there's Fox, which has its position, but this has been very much an election where conversations were going on TikTok, in particular around young people and the algorithm driving this sense of we were somehow living through the new depression. X, owned by the richest man in the world and currently best friend of Donald Trump, who's promised all sorts of, lucrative government contracts and a role dismantling a lot of government bureaucracy. Talk about X, talk about TikTok, talk about podcasts, talk about Joe Rogan. Should Kamala have done Joe Rogan?
Yes. The answer is always to reach out and not be afraid to go on and have extended, open, honest conversations. That's just about authenticity. And even to go into areas where you perceive it will have the confidence to go into speak to audiences you may perceive will be tough or not on quote unquote your side. That's part of, frankly, the obligation of running. And I tried to do that. I do think she should have. I think podcasts, nonetheless, it's enormously impactful. There's a lot of different ways I think the whole process of spreading a message needs to be fundamentally reimagined.
But this just sounds like the Republicans figured out how to send their message more effectively. I mean, when you say about authenticity, yes, she should have gone on Joe Rogan. One of the criticisms of Kamala Harris was that she didn't appear to be authentic, that she said the same things time and again, and she only went on friendly media.
Yeah, and I think she actually ran. Look, we need the full data, and this is about Musk throwing in on X. Remember, initially he was going to stand up to the far right and the far left and all that stuff, and then he threw all in. And I think the impact of Musk throwing in personally and not being held to standards of military contractors, and the impact of X and his effort probably is one of the most important, probably still underappreciated aspects of this election.
And I think it needs to be said before we move on from this point that the Republican Party, the GOP in particular, is willing to say absolutely anything. They're literally willing to spread a lie that is so pernicious and so damaging and spread it all over the place. Haitian populations tearing apart cats and dogs. Eating cats and come on. This was the vice president of the United States spreading this malicious lie that just spread everywhere. So they actually... There's more than just better messaging and better mechanisms for messaging. There's also the fact that a lot of the messaging is just boldly incorrect and a bold lie that spreads like wildfire because it's so fascinating and interesting and shocking.
Well, there's the danger that, what Steve Bannon calls flooding the zone with shit, that it means that good people don't want to get in the arena because it seems like a fundamentally indecent place. Why would you risk your family, your finances, your reputation by participating in our democracy? I felt that's exactly what we should do. So I have 0% regrets doing what I did. And I'm proud of the campaign we ran and the people we inspired, and we did. And so, but that's one of the things that made how sinister it is to see a lie about an election used as a litmus test for party loyalty, and people fall into line. And when we get numb to that, that's when things get incredibly dangerous. And unfortunately, I think that's where we are. And that I do believe in having conversations with Trump supporters, as I did over the course of this campaign, and we won some of their votes.
John, what did you learn when you had conversations with them? When you were going door to door, what did you learn?
What I heard was this. First of all, a lot of Trump voters really do feel we need to reunite as a nation. They feel that. Their focus is on what they perceive to be intolerance from the far left. And I think that's part of what is driving young men. They don't feel respected. They feel sort of suspect when they're in sort of civic conversations, and that causes them to kick back. The excesses, again, of identity politics just getting in the way of treating people as individuals. I think that's part of the undertone and undertold story.
I mean, I have two sons in their mid-20s. I see their friends all the time, and what I hear from them is they feel they're almost guilty for being a young white man. They all felt that the education systems they were in were basically girls' schools or girls' colleges, which, reluctantly took young men.
But isn't that also identity politics? You identify as a young man who has grievances in this world where you have so much power and control. You really do. You really do.
Well, hold on. Let's dig into this, because this is where I think we start to have a breakdown. I wrote the book Wingnuts. Today happens to be my anniversary.
Oh, congratulations. By the way, I meant to say that at the beginning. Congratulations on your wedding anniversary.
Congratulations to my wife, Margaret, who's the host of Firing Line. And I would say her show is more important than ever before in terms of a civic space where you can have civil conversations. Yeah. And I saw people from retirees to union workers to, people love her show because that's not what they're getting. But putting aside for that, shameless plug for my wife. 15 years ago, 2 nights ago, I handed in the manuscript for Wingnuts, which was the first Beast book, which was a book about Wingnuts, how the lunatic fringe is hijacking America. And it was based on my reporting at the time as a columnist about the proto-Tea Party protests after Obama was elected. And I did it sort of with a look at what the background history was. But one of the chapters is called The Birth of White Identity Politics, or White Minority Politics. So I agree with you. That's one of the reasons I don't like identity politics is Donald Trump has revealed the dangers of identity politics by weaponizing white identity politics.
Yes.
And as a historian, the resistance to multiracial democracy is profound in our country. We should be studying Reconstruction a heck of a lot more than we do, right? But the idea that young white men or white men who were working their ass off and trying to provide for a family at a time when it's more difficult to rise to the middle class and rise out of the middle class and provide for your family, that they are avatars of privilege because of their gender and ethnicity or race does not remotely reflect their lived experience, and it causes a lot of righteous resentment. And that's different than grievance politics. What I'm particularly interested in, this is a whole separate topic for another day, is how you do have a whole series of folks who are millionaires, billionaires, centimillionaires, very wealthy, successful people who spend a lot of time sort of marinating in grievance politics. They feel aggrieved. That's much more absurd to me than a guy who is working his ass off and all of a sudden being told that he's got the beneficiary of white privilege when that doesn't reflect his day-to-day experience at all.
You were running in the Hamptons, but you had probably the widest differential of wealth in the entire country, because you've got the richest people in America and you've also got some of the poorest people who service the richest people. Did the inequality of wealth come up much?
Just to understand, the district is Huntington to Montauk. So it's eastern end of Long Island all the way to Huntington. And by the way, the district is one of the most educated districts per capita in the country. But it does have a lot of wealth disparity, and that's what the frustration is. It's the middle class squeeze is going on for decades, which is driving a lot of the anger and frustration in our politics. That's incredibly clear. And the frustration about affordability is fundamental. It's about housing, but it's also inflation and cost of groceries and just it's harder to make ends meet. The fact that Trump and the Republicans took away the state and local tax deduction is a huge issue here. The fact that they just got elected and will almost certainly not lift that cap, and Democrats would have, a lot of folks just codified the fact that their taxes got raised. And this is particularly disproportionate on hardworking, middle class families.
There is not one person that I talk to out in the world, outside the bubble of New York City, and I do talk to people outside the bubble of New York City, which would be very surprising to you, Joanna.
It's totally surprising. They're only in Canada.
There is not one person who does not feel the pinch of prices. It's a big deal. It's a really big deal for people that blueberries cost somehow $11 and they used to cost $3. Like, it's a big ass deal. And it is at the forefront of everybody's minds. And that's just reality.
John, is this the first time something hasn't gone right for you? You seem one of those incredibly...
This is the only time.
Yeah, incredibly successful. Your career's had an incredible trajectory. You seem, in all the photos of your campaign, you seem like the perfect family. Is this the first time anything's gone wrong?
No, of course not. And look, you deal with difficulty. I'm a big believer that, first of all, one of the few things you can control in life is how hard you work. 2, nothing is given. 3, life is 90% mental. And so you need to, I read the Daily Stoic every day, along with other things with my morning coffee. This has been tough for my kids because they campaigned a lot with me. My son in particular was really into it. This is hard, but you also have to model that, in a democracy, you don't always win. And as I said in my email after the election about fighting it's called the good fight, I said, look, democracy depends on respecting the results, even when you don't win. And patriotism requires loving your country no matter who's president. I believe those things, but if we believe them, we need to model them.
What do you do now?
I did remember in the context of this campaign, as I had been at the Beast, that I particularly enjoy running things and leading things.
Well, you're not having that job.
No. I'm not coming after your job. You own the joint. Well negotiated.
But we do want you to come back as a regular contributor to the pod.
I'd be happy to. I enjoy your conversation. I love what you're doing with the Beast. I think there's so much important work to be done, particularly to hold the individuals in this administration to account and to not sort of fall sway to that sense that, they're going to run the table because good people get disengaged, throw up their hands and say, what the hell, because that's where the real danger occurs.
Yep.
We need strong independent journalism more than ever right now.
Well, we relish that challenge. That's the point of it.
Thank
John,
you so much.
Yeah,
This was
thank you so
great
much.
Conversation.
Have a wonderful anniversary with Margaret.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate you. Keep fighting the good fight.
I am so excited about our next interview because if there is anyone on this earth who understands women in power, it is Nell Scovell. Nell is a writer.
Hi.
She's a director. Hi. She's a producer. She created Sabrina the Teenage Witch. She's a writer for The Simpsons, Late Night with David Letterman, even The Muppets in 2013. I mean, I'm talking to you right now. I'm looking at your face and reading your intro, and it's awesome. In 2013, you co-wrote Lean In with Sheryl Sandberg. Do you know this about yourself? Which, I mean, open the whole conversation about gender equality in the workplace. I don't know. Okay. Let's just get into it. Should we just get into the interview? Let's get into it. I don't need to read your intro to you. Okay. Now, what have the last few days been like in your world? I mean, just take me through it.
I feel like people were given this choice between going to the opera or a freak show. And they were like, well, on one hand, you have Mozart's soaring arias. And on the other hand, we could go watch a geek bite off the head of a chicken. And that just seemed like more fun.
I feel like Mozart is talking down to me with all these fancy notes and music that is soothing to my ears. Yuck, no thanks.
Look, where's the bearded lady? She's funny.
So where were you? I mean, Joanna and I have talked about where we were when we were, are you a person who watches election results? Like, did you have different boxes on your television screen? Were you watching the whole thing and feeling your soul crumple, or were you doing something else?
I wasn't watching. I mean, I think we got that 2016 feeling pretty early on.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was the person who went to bed early, woke up, checked my news, and then thought, I will not be looking at the news for another 4 years.
Right.
Don't say that, Nell. Don't say that, because we need you as a reader of The Beast.
We do. We do.
But look, it was a great day for rapists, and especially rapists who want to start a family, because now one of their own is in the office, and the vice president wants to pass laws where victims of rape are forced to carry to term. So, it's not all bad for everyone.
Do you think a woman will ever get elected to the presidency?
I think we'll all be long dead.
In your head, think of an image of a clown, right? It's a man. We don't even have a female clown visual in our heads. And, when Trump dressed up like the garbage man, it was awkward, but we all laughed at it because he was being a clown. And that's something, when women are awkward, it's just kind of sad.
What are all your very well-connected friends saying to you behind closed doors? I can imagine, but I could be wrong.
My friends are sad. There's even ones who will do very well under a Trump administration. I think, it's devastating, and everyone's concerned about, what this will mean. I think we're really in uncharted territory, right?
In terms of understanding the data, you have always made a very good point, which is that Kamala Harris got thrust into this position so she didn't have to look crazy ambitious to be running as a presidential candidate. And that was something that people felt good about. Talk to us about the difficulties of women running for office.
2 decades ago, they did a test at Columbia Business School. It was an experiment. There was a case study of a woman named Heidi, who was this very successful entrepreneur. And they gave the case study to the class. A half got it as written about Heidi, and the other half, they made one change, which is they changed Heidi's name to Howard. So the next class, the professors polled the students about their impressions of the entrepreneur. Both sides rated Heidi and Howard as equally competent, but Howard was much more appealing. They all wanted to work for Howard, where Heidi was seen as selfish and not the type of person you would want to work for. So the study has been reproduced, and the takeaway is this, that success and likability are positively correlated for men and negatively correlated for women. So when a man is successful, he is liked by men and women. And when a woman is successful, people of both genders like her less.
Well, I do, having worked in this, having lived in this world, I guess, for 55 years, do always reflect that America really seems to hate its mommy and need a daddy. And literally, like in the aftermath of the election, people are calling into the Daily and saying, Daddy's back. There's just a lot of like, Daddy's back. And I'm like, this is a really interesting psychological case study. Maybe we could all interrogate.
Margaret Thatcher was called Attila the Hen, and Nixon called Indira Gandhi, the old witch. Angela Merkel was dubbed the Iron Frau. We just don't like these women, even when they have the power.
But Britain has now had 3 female prime ministers. And obviously it had a long-reigning queen as the monarch. Is this just something that's impossible in America? Or was it just that the last 2 female candidates who've run weren't electable enough?
I just think there's this strong undercurrent of white supremacy that's certainly undercut in this election. And it's just so hard to overcome. There was this concept that there might be Republican women who would vote for Kamala secretly, against their husband's wishes. And, I just thought that was a terrible ad to suggest. And my feeling is that these women weren't voting for Trump for their husbands. They were voting for Trump for their sons, for their children, to make sure to lock in whatever white privilege advantages there were for the next generation.
I was thinking about that ad too, and I did like it. I actually think it's an important feature of democracy to let people know that their vote is secret, because I just think it's important to democracy writ large, and people don't know that it's actually private. So I think it's important for people to know that, but I do think it goes, sometimes it can have the effect that you don't necessarily seek.
Nell, to what extent do you think, Sam, that this is about the images of women shown in popular culture? So we grow up in a culture where we see firefighters, policemen rescuing everybody. We constantly see stories about white or black male leaders. But it's so hard to find any shows of successful women. I mean, I guess the nearest is HBO's Veep, with Julia Louis-Dreyfus playing Veep. She gets to be president. She sort of stumbles into it. Everything's a joke. It's hard to think of shows where women are taken seriously.
I mean, I don't know. I don't even know. This is such a huge question. I don't know. I just think misogyny is just so deeply, deeply rooted that it goes way beyond what we're seeing in popular culture. I just think it's just it's in people's bones in a way that is very hard to shake out. And I mean, I don't know if you can even. I don't know if that question is answerable. It's a little bit, the cultural products that we watch are just kind of a derivative of what's in the meat of the bones, really. It's so deep. It's so eternal. It's really daunting. It's really upsetting. It's really upsetting to witness. It's really upsetting for me to witness the fact that people couldn't think outside their lives a little bit to save the lives of women who live in states where there is no access to health care for them. The direction that the country is going to go is going to get so much worse for women. And it is amazing to me that an appeal to young men wouldn't take into consideration the fact that they're a participant in unwanted pregnancies, or they're a participant in the formation of an undesired pregnancy. And voting against their own self-interest is something that people are so good at in this country. And I actually can't comprehend it. I'm not going to cry about it, because what is the point of crying about it at this point? A mandate has been dropped, and we can all see. And so there is no crying. There is only carrying on. That's kind of British. You like
Very
that,
British,
right?
I do. I'm rubbing off on you. I'm rubbing off on you.
You really are. I'm going like one foot in front of the other. I don't know, man. I don't know how this is going to shake out.
By the way, has anyone done a home check on Gloria Steinem? I keep thinking about her and how long and hard she has fought to watch him get elected a second time.
Now, what are your well-placed friends who are big donors or who know the Democratic elite well saying about the campaign?
The big question everyone has was bringing David Plouffe in the right idea, that he was from a different time, from that running this sort of classy campaign with the big rallies. I think that's a big question, but there wasn't a lot of time, and there'll be plenty of blame. Who do you guys blame? Let's each, who's your number one blame?
I actually don't. I think this is a personal feeling. I think they ran as good a campaign as they could run, given the timeline. I blame, if we're going to go there, let's go there. I actually blame the Democratic Party in general for not being really honest about Joe Biden running for a second term a lot earlier, because I know people who were present at interviews with Joe Biden a long time ago, and they observed, was observable to them that he would not be in condition to run for a second term, okay? I mean, we're talking like 2 years ago, all right? And if it is observable to the naked eye of a person who is completely objective party in the room, then it was a known quantity that was not talked about or dealt with in a way that was intelligent and thoughtful and forward-thinking and correct, literally correct for this country. They didn't do anything. They were not honest about it. He was not honest about it. He was extremely arrogant about it. And he did a lot of things that were good, I think. I think he did a lot of things that were good. And I applaud him, and I applaud the people around him for doing things that were correct. But this was a failure that was catastrophic. We could have had an open convention. We could have had all the things that everybody claims that they wanted so badly. We could have had that, and we could have had a longer time to actually. There was so much dissatisfaction with Joe Biden, and they were not honest about it, and they did not really look at it early enough. And so that is where I place the blame. I don't place the blame in Kamala's campaign. I think she did a great job. I think she was a great candidate, actually, and I think she would have been a great president. So that is my honest take.
He also ran on the point that he would be a one-term president, and then clearly changed his mind, as people do when they smell and experience power.
Yeah, we are all experiencing the aftermath of what that arrogance how that arrogance can metastasize and what the aftermath of that. We are all going to live with that for the next 4 years.
And there were definitely voices saying that. I mean, we had James Carville on the show 2 weeks ago. He talks about it in his documentary. It's called Winning Stupid, where he says they should have had an open convention, and where he was saying 2 years ago, Joe Biden needs to step aside so that we can flesh this out in public.
It was not a conversation that you could have. It was not a conversation that was welcome. It was not, and that really swings back around to arrogance. Arrogance will be the death of us all. And he himself is arrogant.
Do you think he's sitting in the White House today thinking I could have beaten him?
No, I think he knows that she lost, and I do think that he thinks that he would have won, and he would not have won. I just sweat so much. I soaked my blazer, even beginning to have that conversation.
Nell Scovell, you're a terrific contributor to The Beast, and I would like you to just tell people what the last line of your column is this week, in case people haven't read it. You did say there was one condition on which Kamala would have won. What is it?
Well, yeah, there are all these shoulda, coulda, wouldas of, should there have been an open convention? Should she have gone on Rogan? But to me, the one thing that she really should have done is something she could not have done, which is have a penis. And ideally, it would have been a magnificent one like Arnold Palmer's.
Nell Scovell, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Nell.
Bye, guys.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this podcast, please like, subscribe, and share this episode with a friend.
And if you're doing that, why don't you share our email too? It is beastpod@thedailybeast.com. Shout out to fellow Canadian Kathy Miller. Hi, Kathy. Hello. Who sent us our first email. Oh, always the Canadians. To let us know that she was not happy with Michael Wolff saying that he wasn't voting. Oh, me too, Kathy, me too. We love hearing what you have to say and who you want to hear on the pod, so keep those emails coming.
We'll be back next Thursday, our regular day, with another episode of the Daily Beast podcast.
And as my muse, and definitely not a fake Melania, once said, be best.
Be beast, Sam.
Of course, as always.